all vaccines are perfectly safe and effective, right? They never cause harm, they have no side effects, and they always work as promised, we're told. It's a great narrative.
It's not a great narrative, it's a great strawman fallacy. Vaccines have side effects which both the packaging and the medical professional administering the vaccine can inform you of. The vast majority of side effects are minor and short-term, such as fatigue, headache, and nausea. Serious side effects occur at a considerably lower rate than that of any of the diseases they protect against, making them the no-brainer right choice. Anyway, I'm R.
And I'm Jay.
Sit back, relax, and watch us debunk this natural news anti-vaccine propaganda. Let's do it.
But if it's really true, then it should apply to other things too.
Why? If your fake narrative apparently applied to vaccines, why does that mean it should apply to anything else? What if it's just unique to vaccines, which by the way it isn't, as it is a fake misrepresentation that you have made up to try and make arguing against it easier?
So let's have some fun and apply that narrative to, let's say, cars.
Cars are too dissimilar to vaccines, given they both have very different functions, so comparing the two would likely be a false equivalence.
If vaccine logic were applied to car manufacturers, then anytime a car had a fatal steering mechanism defect that caused it to swerve on the interstate, crash into an underpass column, and burst into flames, the media would blame the parents.
When has anybody had a vaccine-related injury and the public blamed the parents? Literally, has that ever happened once? They blame the parents when they deny their children vaccines which are proven to be considerably safer than not having vaccines and exposing an individual to a long list of preventable diseases.
It's their fault that the car swerved and blew up because the car manufacturers paid a bunch of scientists to insist that their product never fails.
Okay, there's a lot of stupid to deal with here. Point 1, the comment about paid scientists just shows a severe misunderstanding of how science works. Outside of privately funded research labs, there are universities literally all over the world conducting research independently on vaccines. For the claim that all scientists are paid as part of a global conspiracy, you guys would need to prove it, and if it was true, that shouldn't be hard. But it has not been proven in the slightest. Secondly, stop with the straw man, as no one has said vaccines are 100% effective.
And if anyone actually survives the car crash, they can't sue the car manufacturer for making a defective product either. Why? The auto industry has already been granted absolute legal immunity to all lawsuits, thanks to an act of Congress.
See, you're misrepresenting the truth again. Vaccines aren't very profitable to big companies and are applied to millions of people who could attempt to blame them for giving their child autism, so companies have low motivation to produce them. To combat this, there is a vaccine injury compensation program where lawsuits to do with vaccines are directed at the government, and then afterwards the government follows up with the pharmaceutical companies, whilst taking a small percentage of the money from the vaccines to pay for this service. Long story short, if there is negligence on the vaccine producer's end, then yes, you can sue. The pharmaceutical companies are covered by the government to ensure they continue producing life-saving vaccines, even if it's not highly profitable.
So if their product is defective and you get harmed by it, you're just out of luck.
No, if their product is defective and harms you, then you sue the Vaccine Injury Compensation Program and get compensated. The government then follows up the claim with the pharmaceutical companies to determine any negligence on their part. It's a bad sign when you have to lie to try and prove your point.
If we apply vaccine logic to cars,
which you shouldn't,
then anyone who pointed out that quality was slipping and cars were being made with defective parts would be screamed at by the mainstream media and actually accused of being horrible people for not buying more cars from the same defective manufacturer.
Here's the thing, if you had evidence of this, you wouldn't be accused of being horrible people. The problem is anti-vaccine advocates are essentially dogs barking at the dark. They don't understand it, and they don't actually know if there is anything bad in it, but they are scared, so they just bark and bark, hoping to be taken seriously, which they shouldn't be without real evidence. Also, another point, This analogy doesn't work with cars. Cars aren't built to protect people, well, at least that isn't their primary function. Vaccines are designed to prevent diseases occurring in those who can be vaccinated and those who can't be vaccinated due to medical reasons through a thing called herd immunity. If you don't want to drive a car anymore, no one will care because it doesn't affect anyone except for you. Whereas rejecting the scientific consensus of vaccines endangers not only the children you're withholding the medical treatment from, but other members of society too. Hence the reason they vilify your scientifically illiterate ass.
Scientists on the payroll of car companies would claim there is a scientific consensus that cars never fail and always work great.
Okay, two really important things here. One, no one is claiming vaccines never fail. Please stop pushing that lie. Two, a large portion of researchers are part of publicly funded universities and they work independently or as part of a small team. It isn't just people on the payroll of pharmaceutical companies doing the research. You are basically implying that every single scientist in the world is a corrupt person who has no issue peddling harmful medication to children for money, and not a single one of them in all these years has come out publicly with evidence to show this. Seriously, are you wearing your tinfoil hat right now?
Therefore, anyone who disagreed with that corporate-funded opinion would be labeled anti-science.
To deny the vast amount of peer-reviewed literature based on nothing besides unsubstantiated claims of a giant global conspiracy of which there should be evidence but there is none is anti-science. There is no two ways around it.
But it gets even crazier.
Please don't get crazier. I'm almost at my limit with the crazy.
If a family of 4 gets into a car wreck after the brakes fail, and let's say a young boy is brain damaged in the accident and now needs social assistance for the rest of his life to function in society, using vaccine logic, the car manufacturer would claim it is merely coincidence that the boy became brain damaged at the same moment the car got into an accident. And they would also claim there's no causality between the two events. One didn't cause the other, they would say, so why blame the car company?
Well, at least you were honest there. That did get crazier. Much, much crazier. Again, we already outlined this. You would just sue the Vaccine Injury Compensation Program and get the compensation. However, if it's something vague like, oh, my kid got a vaccine and then was diagnosed with autism, then no, you wouldn't have a case. There has to be a strong causal link which can be proven. It is very easy to prove injuries resulting from a car crash, but as with linking health complications with vaccines, it's much more difficult, but can be done. For example, between the years of 2006 and 2014, 2,146 people were paid compensation from a vaccine-related injury. You clearly can prove vaccines cause some complications, you just don't get to claim correlation equals causation.
And what about buying a new car? If we apply vaccine logic to shopping for a car, then every time you brought your family to a car dealership, the car salesman would inform you that you are required to buy their car, and that if you refuse to buy one, they will call the police and Child Protective Services to have your children taken away.
Are you trying to be stupid? Firstly, I'm not aware of any country where vaccines are required by law to the degree that you get arrested for denying them. But even if that was the case, the analogy still doesn't work because a car's primary function isn't to protect people, and not owning one can't harm someone, so forcing someone to buy one has no function. But you know, what is compulsory to do with cars? Wearing seatbelts, because they are proven to work and create minimal risk to the driver and passengers. We have laws in place to make people not unnecessarily endanger their own lives or the lives of others. Now, there may be a debate to be had here regarding personal liberty, but now isn't the time. Another thing to point out is the idea of being able to choose from a range of vaccines to cure a very specific disease is an absolutely ridiculous concept. The fact that we even have a single cure for a very serious illness is amazing. It's a very first world problem to be complaining about not having multiple options.
Mainstream media outlets like USA Today would openly call for the gunpoint arrest and imprisonment of parents who refused to buy the car, saying it was irresponsible not to buy a car that all the car company's scientists assured everyone was completely safe and flawless.
Again, cars don't relate to vaccines enough for this analogy to work, hence this is a false equivalence fallacy. I've already addressed your claim that all the scientists are paid for by the companies, and I've also pointed out that no one is claiming that vaccines are flawless. Now, there may be a discussion to be had about arresting anti-vaxxers or some kind of law enforcement. I personally wouldn't advocate for it, and I'm pretty sure the vast majority of other people wouldn't either. But that being said, something does have to be done about these scientifically illiterate conspiracy theorists who are endangering the lives of their children and other people by rejecting important medical care and spreading misinformation.
Speaking of the media, if the media applied vaccine logic to automobile industry stories, then all auto recalls would be completely censored. No stories calling into question the safety of automobiles would ever be allowed to air.
I live in Australia, and vaccine-related injuries do get covered by the media here. You just don't see it much because the rate of serious complications is so low, but when it happens, it is covered. I can't speak for other countries, but I find it hard to believe that it is different in any other developed nation. We also live in an age where anybody with access to the internet can have their story heard by millions of people by simply sharing it in public forums. Although it's very difficult to substantiate those stories, it means that anyone can be heard in countries that don't have internet censorship.
Instead, the entire national media would run story after story of how amazing and miraculous these cars are.
Vaccines are actually miraculous. In my opinion, they are probably the single greatest medical discovery after antibiotics. They have got us to a point where the diseases are so beaten back that ignorant people like you can forget just how serious they can be and then start blaming them for other non-related issues. Vaccines being so successful actually serves as a detriment in some ways, which is sad.
And then if whistleblowers inside the car companies tried to go public with details of manufacturing defects and design flaws that put lives at risk, well, they would be threatened with arrest and imprisonment, or bribed with promises of big corporate bonuses if they just keep their mouths shut.
Look, I'm sorry, but my patience is really running thin here, so I will quote the late Christopher Hitchens. That which can be asserted without evidence can be dismissed without evidence. Prove your conspiracy claims. Strong evidence can change my mind, but right now I am completely convinced you have no good reason to believe that.
That's why if we were to really apply vaccine logic to cars, they wouldn't have any seat belts. No airbags either. No anti-lock brakes. Well, who needs safety features when the cars are already perfectly safe and the manufacturers already have absolute legal immunity from all lawsuits? Innovation in safety systems is no longer necessary.
See, here's the difference. If cars were actually faulty at a high enough rate that it was a serious concern, the evidence would be clear and people wouldn't be able to deny it. There is no good evidence suggesting vaccines have a significant adverse effect rate, but there is lots of evidence to suggest they have a significant effect for preventing diseases. Seriously, this analogy is so bad, did you take any time at all to think it through? And even if we did play along with this analogy, why are you removing safety features from the car? Surely you must realize that vaccines and drugs undergo rigorous trials to determine their efficacy. Your analogy is like saying the pharmaceutical companies decide to wing it and create a vaccine and distribute it en masse without any testing. If that were true, then it's pretty impressive given their success.
Especially when car companies can charge any price they want because families all across America are forced to buy them, essentially at gunpoint.
Essentially at gunpoint. By essentially, do you mean not at all close to by gunpoint? Also, you realize vaccines aren't that profitable for companies, right? Vaccines make up around 1.8% of pharmaceutical profits. If pharmaceutical companies wanted to make more money, they just wouldn't make vaccines, let people get sick, and then charge them for all the medical treatment that they will need to get better. Man, you guys are really misinformed.
Vaccine logic says that car companies could keep selling us the same stagnant Fords and Chevys from the 1950s, no improvements necessary, because when consumers don't have a choice, and when there's no incentive to make safer products, why would corporations bother to spend money on innovations that don't help them make more money?
Vaccines are constantly being improved. Take the flu vaccine, for example. It has a relatively low efficiency due to how resistant the virus is and how often it mutates, so researchers are working around the clock to try and improve it. Also, a lot of money is spent developing vaccines for diseases that don't currently have a vaccine. If they didn't care about the vaccine being efficient, wouldn't they have just released one that was just a saline solution for Ebola or Zika, charged everyone, and then ran and sat behind government immunity when they didn't work, laughing on a pile of money? The reason they don't do that is they can't, because they don't have government immunity from recourse, they can't produce a product that is actually dangerous, and they can't produce a product that doesn't work, because people would actually notice, be able to prove it, and then the pharmaceutical companies would get destroyed.
Applying vaccine logic to cars even more, children whose parents refuse to buy the unsafe overpriced vehicles would be banned from attending public school as a way to shame the parents into buying something that they believe is less than safe.
The reason for banning unvaccinated children from schools, which by the way not everywhere does, is to protect the other children from the spread of diseases, as vaccines aren't 100% effective. They just make someone far less likely to catch an infection. The main function of vaccines is herd immunity, where if everybody is resistant to it, the disease can't take foot in the population because it is too hard to spread around and then winds up dying out. The reason you had to say it was to shame the parents was because the car analogy doesn't work. As I must have said 10 times by now, the primary function of a car isn't to protect someone and the people around them. Seriously, this analogy is so broken, I am surprised you are still sticking with it.
And just like we've seen with vaccines today, doctors would refuse to see patients who didn't own the faulty cars, denying them health care as yet another way to force them into complying with the car safety delusions that are blindly followed by everyone else.
I'm pretty sure doctors don't deny medical care to unvaccinated people. They just deny signing exemption forms for the misinformed parents' personal reasons, as you go to them for their evidence-based opinion, not to do whatever crazy stuff you want them to. A pediatrician won't sign your vaccine exemption form for the same reason a plastic surgeon won't give you the surgery to make you look like the alien from the movie Predator. It's unethical. Side note, being Predator would be pretty cool.
It turns out that if cars were made today with the same abandonment of safety that the vaccine industry follows...
I like it how you just slipped that in there. Prove it. Can you give me some hard evidence for that claim? Because again, that which can be asserted without evidence can be dismissed without evidence.
You'd see car accidents every day all around you, with children being harmed and even killed in accidents caused by flawed quality control and manufacturing practices that ignore safety.
And that is where this whole video falls apart, because part of that was right. If there was a significant problem with cars, it would be completely obvious, everyone would notice, and there would be lots of evidence for it. But that rate of injury just doesn't exist for vaccines. You want a dog barking at a burglar, you're a dog barking at the dark.
So it begs the question, why does the vaccine industry get away with pushing defective products onto the public while the auto industry gets sued?
Because they don't push defective products onto the public, as the Vaccine Injury Compensation Program would get sued and the government would come after them for causing so much suffering and costing so much money.
Well, the auto industry doesn't have legal immunity.
Again, the companies that produce vaccines don't either. The government basically takes money out of vaccines to deal with the public regarding vaccine injuries, like an insurance policy, and then punishes the pharmaceutical companies if they do anything truly negligent. Vaccines are essential to societal well-being, but aren't very profitable and are a lot of trouble to produce, so the government creates the Vaccine Injury Compensation Program for them. Cars don't require the same incentive building, as they are super profitable and a luxury item.
So it has a financial incentive to invest in innovation, safety enhancements, quality control, and even legitimate laboratory testing of its product safety. The vaccine industry doesn't.
Considering your entire analogy was a giant failure for a list of reasons outlined in this video, I obviously don't accept that claim. You know what would have been a better video? Actually showing evidence for every one of these claims, instead of this weak, unsubstantiated analogy. 6 out of 10 for effort, 0 out of 10 for content accuracy.
Why bother? No clinical trials are needed, nor pursued for many vaccines. It says so right on the vaccine inserts.
That I find hard to believe. See, that's what I'm saying. Instead of just throwing that in there without evidence and continuing with the terrible analogy that doesn't work, take some time to actually show some evidence for that point. Prove it. Because that which can be asserted without evidence can be dismissed without evidence. If you had taken the time to list the specific vaccines and any issues around it, you may actually have a legitimate argument to pursue. Instead, you seem to think that this terrible analogy equates to an argument by itself.
Vaccine logic says that all vaccines are automatically safe and effective the moment they are created, almost by definition. Thus, there's no safety testing or innovation or quality control required at all.
Oh, come on. I know you guys are anti-vaccine, but even you can't possibly believe people actually say that vaccines are safe by definition. And having to lie and strawman your opponents by saying the vaccine industry has no regulations at all for safety doesn't bode well for your cause actually being true.
Maybe that's why people keep dying after being vaccinated. Just like these 13 people in Italy who died recently.
Now here we go, specifics finally. It was 4 elderly people that died after taking a flu vaccine. The government then suspended the vaccine and began investigating. The media claimed more deaths were linked to the vaccine without evidence. The investigations and autopsies showed no causal link between the vaccine and deaths, but the vaccine was suspended anyway as a cautionary measure whilst more investigations were conducted. What actually happened doesn't really seem to fit with your narrative. Okay, next one, go.
Or these teenage girls who died after receiving HPV vaccinations.
Okay, the medical examiner discovered the cause of death was actually diphenhydramine intoxication, which wasn't in the HPV vaccine they took. I hope I pronounced that right. Anyway, 14 million people get the HPV vaccine each year, so even if that vaccine did cause it, that is such a low rate compared to the conditions it prevents. Another one? Alright, lay it on me.
Or this 5-year-old girl who died from the flu right after being vaccinated against the flu.
Now, the CDC has reported that the efficiency of the influenza A vaccine ranges from 10 to 60%, as that strain of the flu is quite resilient, as mentioned before. Lots of children die from the flu each year, and researchers are doing everything they can to increase the efficiency of the vaccine. No one is claiming vaccines are 100% effective, and doctors, researchers, and medical organizations all openly state that the efficiency of the flu vaccine is relatively low, and that parents decide whether or not to vaccinate. Which, given the adverse effect rate is so low, and it can reduce the chance of getting the flu, it is still a good move. This example only works in your favor when we accept the straw man that claims people say vaccines are 100% efficient. If we are honest about vaccine efficiency, your example doesn't help your case. Any more evidence?
And maybe that's why these big pharma scientists who tried to go public with information about the fabricated science used by Merck to fake the laboratory results of mumps vaccines were threatened with jail time unless they stayed silent.
It's funny that you just provided specific cases before, but now that you're back to your conspiracy claims, there are no more specifics but unsubstantiated assertions again. Names, please, otherwise you know what's coming, don't you? That which can be asserted without evidence can be dismissed without evidence.
People who are getting vaccinated today are relying on the fraudulent safety claims of an industry that's still stuck in the vaccine technology of the 1950s.
You realise the combustion engine hasn't changed much since the 1950s either, just small improvements here and there, but no change of the core concept. So this is one of the times where your car analogy might actually work, as the overall concept of vaccines hasn't changed significantly, but small tweaks and improvement are made here and there as the science progresses, due to the great success of the original model.
An era when the toxic heavy metal mercury was thought to be medicine, which is why it's still used in vaccines today.
Wow, I actually thought the anti-vaxxers had given up on the mercury claims, given it has been debunked so many times. Thimerosal is a preservative form of mercury, and there has not been any evidence to suggest it causes any negative health effects. It isn't the same kind of mercury that's used in thermometers. Also, because scientifically illiterate people barked at the dark so much about it, they removed thimerosal from vaccines anyway. In Australia, they haven't been used since the year 2000. So it's actually not dangerous, and it's not even in vaccines anyway. Strong argument you have there.
Vaccines are really a third world technology being forced onto first world nations. They're the product of an industry that has abandoned innovation and relied on scientific bullying rather than transparency to silence critics, whistleblowers, and even families who have children harmed by vaccines.
Yeah, none of that is true. I'm going to do it again. Oh, here I go. That which can be asserted without evidence can be dismissed without evidence. Woo!
So the next time you go shopping for a new car, thank your lucky stars the automobile industry isn't running on vaccine logic. Or you'd be driving an outdated death machine down the highway with no seatbelt and no airbags that gets 9 miles to the gallon.
The next time I am making an analogy, I will be thankful that I'm not running on anti-vaccine logic, because if I was, I might wind up comparing elephants to rocks and thinking it's a great analogy for Harry Potter or something to that effect.
Remember, when it comes to vaccine logic, If you get harmed by a faulty product made by an unethical company with a quality control problem, it's your fault, your expense, and your tough luck.
So, as we have already outlined, that just simply isn't true. If you suffer any injury or detriment at the hands of vaccines, there are legal recourses to get compensation and punish anyone who committed that negligence. Your entire video was just a misrepresentation of all your opponents. The fact that you are willing to lie so blatantly makes me concerned, considering the negative repercussions of denying essential medical care to the public. I get it. If you aren't scientifically trained, it can be scary to let someone come at your child with a needle or something you don't understand. But society just won't function if we can't delegate tasks. I can't fix my own car, so I hire a mechanic. I can't design electronics, so I buy them. And I can't give myself medical treatment, so I go to a doctor. I give back to society by doing the job I was trained for years at university to do, and I hope other people trust me as I know what I'm doing. It's hard to give trust to people you don't know, but we have designed a system where people have to do their jobs properly or there are repercussions. You can claim that they have immunity all you want, but that just isn't true. You have misunderstood what the Vaccine Injury Compensation Program is. You owe it to not only yourself but everyone around you to investigate the scientific side of this argument without the tinfoil hat on. Thanks for watching. Subscribe to our channel for weekly videos, click the like button, and share this video with an anti-vaxxer to help us raise the bar of public discourse.